across the pond to Europe as this year comes to an end. One thing has not, and that is the Ukraine conflict. From Germany, Natalie Carney reports on how the fighting has affected Europe's largest economy.
It's no secret that the conflict in Ukraine has weakened economies across the European Union. In many ways, Germany has been affected more than others. In 2022, the first year of the conflict, Germany's GDP shrank by around 1.8% compared to 2021. And this year, it is expected to shrink by 0.3% as high inflation and rising interest rates take their toll on the economy.
There is a massive cost for Germany for a number of reasons. High dependence on gas, oil and coal from Russia, the impact on energy costs, slowing demand in Europe, lower exports for Germany, then of course confidence. Companies investing less, consumers consuming less because of very high inflation.
Energy prices increased dramatically in 2022 as the country quickly diverted imports away from Russia to other, more expensive suppliers, while inflation hit nearly 8%. But federal subsidies of around $44 billion have since helped bring those numbers down. In addition, Berlin has initiated a $110 billion defense budget to help beef up a historically underfunded army, while also helping fund Ukraine's own defense.
A giant Ukrainian flag was hoisted here in front of Munich's Palace of Justice just in the early days of the conflict as a symbol of Germany's support for justice in Ukraine. Yet Germany's support extends far beyond just that. Berlin is the second largest financial contributor to Ukraine's defense after the U.S.
Earlier this month, Germany's coalition government resolved a budget crisis that maintained the allowance to increase support for Ukraine next year. Since the start of the conflict, Germany has spent nearly $8.5 billion on military assistance to Ukraine and has budgeted for a further $11.5 billion in the coming years. Should more be needed, Chancellor Olaf Scholz has said the government would seek an exemption from borrowing limits.
If the situation worsens as a result of Russia's war against Ukraine, for example because the situation on the front deteriorates, or because other supporters reduce their aid to Ukraine, or because the threat to Germany and Europe continues to increase, then we will have to react.
Millions has also been spent to support Ukrainian refugees in Germany.
So there are about 1.2 million Ukrainian refugees in Germany today. More are likely to come, and also that has seen a spending of close to 10 billion euros on living expenses, on housing, on language courses, helping them to integrate.
While these economic measures have not stopped the German economy from falling into recession, they are, arguably, saving it from a deeper one and keeping Germany safe. Natalie Carney for CGTN in Munich.
For more insights into Europe's economy, I spoke to Remi Piet, the senior partner at Embellie Advisory.
There's a slowing down of European economies, which is much more, impacted by, impact on inflation on consumer prices and local and domestic consumption. However, indeed, when we look back a year ago and we were considering the impact of the Ukraine conflict, the questions on energy security, on the capacity of entering supplies, there was, growing concerns for Europe to be able to maintain these steps of, still maintaining a very low but albeit existing, growth of between 0.7 to 1% at the end of this year. This has been the result of resilience at the European level of countries working together to try to solve some exogenous factors and conflict outside that could have really impacted and put in jeopardy the security of European economies. But at the same time, a series of countries that were able to do key reforms to their pension plans or to a series of approach to the economy. France is leading the pack in terms of countries that are attracting international investment because of the quality of the fundamentals from this workforce to good reforms that were done on the labor market. Others are a little lagging behind, such as the UK, facing the negative impact of Brexit and difficulties of being able to access new markets. But more generally, there's been quite a resilience from the European continent, both in terms of stock market and level of unemployment.
But the thing is, Remi, how can that be? We went into the year with great concern over gas supplies, energy costs, specifically because of the Ukraine conflict, and somehow investors seem to have I guess, put that aside?
The European economies are very much at risk when it comes to energy prices. The situation a year ago was overly speculative on oil and gas prices. We've seen a steady decline of those prices along a year, mainly due to the fact that there's been a series of investment in alternative sources of energy, new supply routes that have been agreed, and so therefore the key structural risk to the European economies of difficulties to access energy at good costs has kind of faded away along the year. And as I was saying, the domestic consumption, despite inflation, remained quite steady. That is linked to the fact that European countries are usually more supportive with a series of incentives than North American or other developing emerging nations. So the impact of inflation is a little bit lower. There's a lot of different subsidies to lower classes, and so for that there's the capacity for the countries and the economy to remain resilient in spite of a series of headwinds that have been constant. And leading to the situation as we have today, which is obviously a slow developing economy, but still resilient.
But again, I don't want to harp on this, but you had an increase of rates from the ECB and also in the UK as well. You still have a cost of living, maybe it's not a crisis, but it's still a concern for a lot of consumers and businesses. How can this economy continue to move along, say, in 2024, and where might you be most optimistic about?
So the key structural difference between European economies and others is the level of savings and individual savings. The Europeans don't live to the extent of living at credit than North American, and therefore are a little bit more resilient to external shocks in the short run. That's why we're arriving to more mid to long run impact of a series of key economic indicators such as inflation, and that's why we're seeing a slowing down now a little bit later down in the year of economic development and capacity for growth. However, at the same time, the ECB has been quite supportive of the economy. The rates have not increased over the last decision, and unemployment is at an all-time low in certain countries. I mean, compare as I was mentioning France in the case of one of the leading economy, as seeing as 6 to 7% unemployment rate when it used to be 10 to 11, and that shows the capacity to just train the workforce and therefore reducing the impact that it has on state coffers of having to pay unemployment benefits.
Yeah, it really is amazing. Most recently, you've seen the Fed essentially be on pause for the time being, declaring victory on inflation. The ECB has also made similar statements as well. At least investors don't think that they're going to be raising rates anytime soon, and I would also include the UK in that as well. Both of these should be pretty good tailwinds for 2024. Would you agree that investors are right to be bullish, and what countries would you look at in terms of upside surprises?
So I do, and the fact that the interest rates have increased quite a bit over the last few months gives some margins of maneuver to central banks. So if there's real slowdown of the economy or real intensification of worries and risks, then there is a margin to maneuver to try to provide some incentives and boost the economy. In terms of where I would look for economic return and positive, I'd look for in Europe. I'd look at a series of different sectors, and specifically the ones probably not on consumer goods, because that's where the demand is decreasing as of today. But I'll be looking much more at industrial sectors, especially with the light of a series of key decisions, especially the Critical Raw Material Act, a series of incentive to reindustrialize Europe. Europe has been very weak on its capacity of retaining industries, but there's been some key moves, and we see a series of good investment going there. In terms of countries, the Eastern Europe has always had more margins for good returns and growth. But in a time where you have growing uncertainties and then there's general slowdown, I will maybe be a little more bearish and go on the German and French economies. The Brexit has had its impact on the UK, but you see a series of different recent policies from Rishi Sunak to reach out to other individual countries to be able to make joint investment or joint initiative, especially towards North America with the inclusion of battery manufacturing, electric car manufacturing to the IRA scheme in North America. So it's really in terms of looking at those key sectors and how those will be able to benefit from global positive output